Tom, I started off the post or the survey on Facebook asking this question, what do you have expertise or mastery in? And I put a couple of my own in there as well. I'm aware of mountain biking, is one. I mean, I've been biking all my life. I mean, I think I got, started to ride bikes at 3 or 4. I remember my first real bike at age 5 and started racing BMX at 10 after that's what we did, back then before screens. We actually just went outside and rode bikes and messed around. And I've been doing it competitively. And I'm so aware that, especially on a downhill now, as I go out to ride, that I can go careening down some downhill and have multiple times where I kind of lose it. And I'm like prepared to hit the dust, and I don't. My body is just so good at reacting, even better than my mind. And that's what I thought of when I heard your dad give this message on mastery. And it reminded me of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, where he talks about the 10,000 hours. That's a lot. I mean, I put that into cycling, but I was thinking about that because I also cited podcasting, which is not fair because it's really just saying having a conversation. So you and I jump on this, you do it well too, but I was thinking about that 10,000 hours. That's a lot. If I've done 1,000 shows, which I think I've done over that now, but 1,000 shows. And if they last hour, even if they lasted an hour and a half, which they don't average that much. And if I have, an hour, well, even that, an hour of prep, but it's still not of actually doing it. And I'm still a long way from my 10,000 hours. That's actually a little demoralizing as I think about it, but that's a big deal to have something that you are so masterful in that you can do it thoughtlessly. And I'm just intrigued by this idea that your dad shared in the message we just heard of then it frees us up to, in that moment of doing it, to be creative and go outside the box in essence. So that's why I wanted to bring the show here and talk about it. What do you think?
I love it. And it speaks to the genesis of Zig Ziglar's speaking career.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. He was in direct sales and he sold stainless steel waterless cookware. And he did it through a dinner party format where there would be 5 couples around the table and he would be cooking them dinner, demonstrating each pan and the set of cookware. And it was a script. And he did that hundreds of times, so much so that he was able to give all of his attention to the body language,
Yeah.
facial expressions, and tone of the people at the dinner party.
Yeah.
And that's what made him ultimately successful. It wasn't that he didn't know the script by, perfectly. It was that he could, like you do, going down a mountain, which is crazy, by the way, on a bike. I ski occasionally, and there are boulders underneath the snow, and so I'm imagining you riding down that same area where there is no snow to protect you from the boulders.
Yeah, but at least I can see them. I'm a hack skier, man. I'm a very mediocre skier. I do it quite a bit, but not that good. But yeah, cycling, I put my chops in, I guess.
But the same thing, he knows exactly where to take the conversation based on
Yeah.
all the subtle feedback that the audience is giving, and that's like one of the key ingredients of being a great speaker, right? It's you got to know your stuff, you got to prepare, you've got to be all in it, you got to have energy, you got to do all those things. But timing is about relating to the audience. And when you get that down, that's just a whole nother level. And that comes with thousands of hours.
Well, it got me to thinking about wondering if we are, because the workplace is so, I don't want to say, I guess it is volatile, but it's so transitionary. I mean, we seldom have people these days who stay in one job, one position that long. Transition just happens. And when people, instead of dad having a job for 40 years, he may have 40 jobs. And that's more the norm. And I wonder if that's robbing us of the opportunity, unless we go into the same job somewhere else doing the same thing, but we don't have as much mastery in it. And I'm kind of enamored with that, even with my kids, looking at that. I've got a daughter, Eliza, she's 21, works for me. She helps produce the shows. And she just recently, she does henna. She's been doing it for years. She's been doing art. I'll just say that she has been applying herself to art, painting, watercolors, all kinds of different things. And then she did it to henna. So if somebody's not aware of that, henna, it's like a temporary tattoo. It's these little cones and you squirt out these little fine lines. She has been doing it so long, so much that she's a master at it. So she just did a farmer's market on a Friday. And so she's sitting there with these little cones, like $6 a piece. She may use a couple. She has no prep, no whatever. She just sits down, put the signs up. She makes $350 on Friday. She goes on Saturday, $350. She goes on Sunday, and it was July 4th, big shindig. She made $820. So $1,500 in 3 days, but it was about 5 hours. Maybe a little each day, maybe a little bit for setup. But again, she had no prep. She wasn't, back making woodcraft stuff to bring to the thing. She just shows up with her stuff. And the mastery, I'm so grateful for that. She's now looking and saying, gosh, maybe I should go into like tattoos, up her skills. She has people keep asking her to. And, but it's just interesting looking at that and wondering, are we not valuing the repetition? And Tom, honestly, I think I generally don't. I don't like repetition. I don't like to do something over and over again. And yet, well, Stephen Kotler, Stephen from authoring different books. We had him on Ziglar's show 853. It was January 11th, 2021. And he has the book, The Art of Impossible. And he talks about flow. That's his big thing, getting in flow. And we had the discussion, can you really get into that flow unless you have mastery? I mean, I wonder, is that something you have, on the, well, you do it with coaching or on stage or even on the golf course?
Used to on the golf course. The golf will interrupt your flow, my friend.
Yeah.
Because there's bad bounces. I will say this: on stage in front of a group, there's nothing more exhilarating, exciting, fulfilling, satisfying than flow, than getting in front of a group. And instead of feeling obligated to recite your prepared speech, invite the audience in and get a dialogue going back and forth around the most important things to that audience. Mm-hmm. And letting the connections happen, letting it lead to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still going to teach the main points that everybody needs to take away. But you have to have a lot of reps to feel really confident and comfortable in going in that direction. Because if you're not confident and sure, or if you don't have the breadth of knowledge, then you can get too far out over your skis.
Yeah.
Right. You can go down the part of the slope you shouldn't have been on.
Yeah.
But that's it. And I don't know how you do that. It's like you hear about professional athletes like Tony Romo, who is an amazing golfer. He's a fantastic golfer. And he's trying to, he plays in pro tournaments and, he makes the cut or he gets invited and he plays and he represents pretty good. The difference is that when he hits it in the rough and he's looking at that shot out of the rough, his experience is maybe he's hit 100 shots and under pressure in a similar situation. Your tour pro who's the same age has hit 10,000 shots. And it's just really interesting how a little bit of variable like the rough will totally change everything. Because if you know what it's going to do and you execute versus you think what it's going to do and you almost execute, that's 20 feet on the green. Yeah. I mean, that's the difference between I might make birdie to I better not make bogey. Right? And it's that little subtle thing. And what was the difference in those two players? It wasn't natural ability. And it might not even be the quality of the swing. It was knowing that exact circumstance, what you're visually taking in, what the wind's doing, what the humidity's doing, what the grain of the grass is doing, how much your adrenaline's flowing in that situation, because all of those things are variables that the tour guys under pressure, they know how to execute. They know what the ball's going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it just has me thinking of, again, us taking captive, maybe giving more value and gravity to the tasks in our work, especially in this industry. I mean, we're so prone to look at progress, right? We want the promotion, we want to go to the next thing. Are we taking the time? It's somewhat antithetical to what I probably talk about for the most part. It's the evolution, grow, increase progress, that I feel like Zig's calling us somewhat to this and going, now maybe hold on a second. Have you mastered it so you can free yourself up to see the other opportunities? And I appreciate him saying that we can so often in a workplace get some of the best insight from somewhat of he doesn't say it in this terms, but the lower paid workers who do the by rote thing over and over and over and over and over. They're not paid the most because it's not the most skilled position, but they're the ones who can just do it by rote. They don't have to think about it. Meanwhile, they're seeing other things and opportunities that, gosh, we can make that better, or that's stupid. Why are we doing that? And I've just never thought about it, which again, I appreciate this topic because of that. And here's a couple that, Jessica Smith Moyer. She's a ZLC coach and she teaches fitness classes. And that's what she said. Where has she gained expertise and mastery? She was teaching fitness classes, helping women find purpose, helping others find purpose through loss. Now I'm interested in that. It'd be fun to have her talk through that journey, because I assume, from what I understand, she's been teaching fitness classes for a long time. She's been doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And through that, kind of like you talked about with your dad, he's up on stage and he's doing it so often, or he's selling pots and pans. He's doing it so much that he's able to kind of let that habit just happen without having to think about it, and let his mind go above the task to look at the people and discern the mood and their interest and respond to that. That Jessica was able to do that. She can be up there doing her fitness class and leading these people. And meanwhile, notice the facial expression on this lady, or notice what this lady says, and tune into, hey, you could imagine Jessica, you've been face to face with her. I could imagine her saying, hey, I just noticed you today. What's happening? And boom, 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 something happens. And that's what brought her into, hey, I'm going to go beyond just the physical fitness, and I can address their emotional fitness and the things that they want to go after. And now she went and got certified, Ziglar Legacy Certification certified, and she is doing that. It'd be an interesting conversation with her, probably made possible because the primary thing that she was doing, the initial thing, she did it so much she could do it without thinking. And as Zig said, go into that left brain and start being creative.
Yeah. And the last thing she said there, and I know Jessica well, and she's written an amazing book. Her her main learning came from the loss of a child,
Right, right.
right? Triumph through the tears. And so, we all in life, we have our own challenges, burdens, trials that we go through. And we take out of that, how much do we take out of that? How does it change us? What does it help us to learn about ourselves and how we can help others? And she has chosen, not because she set out going, boy, I hope something happens to me so I can help other people. That wasn't it at all. It's like, gosh, how do I make sense of what happened and what's the purpose in this? And she channeled that into, how do I get well first? What do I need to do for myself? How can I help other people get well and physically? And then that opened the doors to the emotional, right?
Mm.
And to the other challenges that people face. Um, there's a lot of, the 10,000 hours. I think, Kevin, you've also got to count in that it's not only the doing it, it's the thinking of it and everything. And everybody's a little different. If I'm writing something for a book, um, and I've got a month to do it, I might spend three weeks writing it in my head, and then it just pops out, and people think, "Wow, that just popped out."
Yeah, true.
And I'm like, "No, that's I've tested it in conversations in the hallway and on stage and in elevators. I mean, that was one of the things that Dad would do is he would get warmed up to go on stage. I mean, his craft was so amazing on stage. But if you walk from with Dad from, hey, I'll come to your room at 8 and we'll go down and have breakfast and we'll, then we'll get in the car and we'll go over to the facility and we'll sit in the green room and then I'll be there when you go on stage. I mean, that's what I did with him numerous times.
Yeah.
Well, he told bits and pieces of his talk every step of the way. The person on the elevator got a joke. The driver of the car got a story. The waiter or waitress that served us breakfast, got an introduction. It was just amazing to see how in neuroscience it's kind of like creating the slots in your brain so that as you plan it out, as you practice it out, when you finally get there to the big stage, whether that stage is your business or a literal stage, it just happens. It flows.
Yeah, it makes me think of just immersion. And I'm thinking back even to what I said about podcasting. Yeah, if I put in the time of not just this right here, face to face, doing a conversation, recording a podcast, but think about the thought that goes into it, the planning, the research that I've done, the production. I would say, yeah, I'm over my 10,000 hours by now. And it feels that way. I did an interview or had a guest on yesterday, and afterwards she was effusive about how I did, about the conversation that didn't feel like an interview and all these things. And I thought I'm able to keep up with the conversation and think beyond it now. And I'm so grateful for that. It's so different. It's interesting because my preparation is so much less than it used to be because it doesn't have to be. I don't have to sit there and read a script or go through my exact questions and flow, and I can be a little more organic. Now, you mentioned with Jessica, Tom, trauma. That was interesting because it came up in the responses. Amy Ellis, she says her skill is identifying narcissists in 10 minutes or less. And Laura McCorkle responded and said exactly what I was going to say, figuring out people's intentions pretty quickly. Now, I know Laura, and she has a very difficult story with a husband that's actually in jail right now. Definitely scores high on the narcissist list. And he had her immersed in a very strict religious, arguable cult, is what I'd say. So to see that trauma, actually Tamara McDuff, she also responded, seeing opportunities in tragedy or loss and standing on my mess and not in it. I've been doing a lot of personal growth and reflection. So here's three that I would say to what you brought up with Jessica have dealt with trauma. And as terrible that is, we wouldn't wish it on anybody. Can you claim a strength or an insight from that? Absolutely. I mean, my gosh, if you've dealt with grief like Jessica, I don't understand that to the degree that she does. If you grew up with a serial killer as a parent, I would say later on as an adult, you probably got pretty good insight into how they kind of function. It's a little different and you could pick that out. Sounds like a TV or a movie script, but it's legitimate. I don't know that I've ever hung out with a serial killer much, but I don't have insight into that. So that's another interesting place to look at mastery is, have we had repeated exposure to something that gives us mastery to some degree, even though it was by osmosis, somewhat. I wouldn't think, I'm just thinking out loud here. I wouldn't necessarily say, am I an expert in, forestry and the woods and nature and wild animals? I've never thought about that, but I actually live in a national forest. I mean, yesterday we ate outside. We were outside for probably 5 hours. We ate outside. We built a bonfire, stayed out there till everybody went to bed. I probably spent another hour just sitting there, listening to some music, looking at the fire, looking up. It was a perfect night of the sky. I'm making you jealous, aren't I?
You're killing me.
It was perfect, Tom, that the aspen leaves are out, which, by the way, what I came to realize after being out here for 12 years, no, I've been out here longer than that, but at the house, at least for 12 years, is that the aspen leaves come in. It now dawns on me why it's so majestic. We really only have the leaves on the trees for about 4 months. from the time they bud and come out to where they turn yellow is about 4 months. So the wind coming through them like it was last night, it's the sound, the clapping aspen leaves. We don't get it, but what is that? A third of the year. So it was just incredible. The moon was bright, and I would say, well, gosh. And I went camping last weekend. This is the third or fourth trip recently, and it's like I spend a lot of time out there. I guess I am attuned somewhat to it. Yeah.
I tell you what, take me home.
You're welcome. But it's interesting to think of what is it that we've even been exposed to that we probably have some mastery with, like them with trauma.
So just before this call, or before this podcast recording, I was on a call talking to an old friend. We went to college together, and just got let go wrongly from a 32-year position.
Wow.
And he's like, what do I do now? And he wants to stay in that field. It's a pretty niche field. There's not a lot of it's sponsored by grant money and nonprofits and things like that. So it's not it's not like make your own way, generate, lots of revenue. It's not that kind of an opportunity. But boy, does our society need it. And what he does is amazing. And you could just hear the flatness in his voice. And so I started talking to him. I'm like, well, 32 years. Wow, that's something. I bet there's nothing you can't do. And he's like, yeah, I've kind of done everything from, fixing toilets to running huge productions. And I said, yeah, I bet there's nobody in your industry that you would talk to that has more experience than you do. And all of a sudden you could just feel his thought pattern turning a little bit. Wait a second. So in his mind, he's moving from the rejected, we don't want you anymore, to, hey, you know what? I'm the expert. And these people made a bad decision under false assumptions for their own personal reasons that has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the call progressed, I kept reminding him, so somebody new in what you're doing, what kind of problems would they have? And so he's like listing them off. You've solved all those already, haven't you? Yeah, I have. Do you think that you could be of value to them if you helped them solve those problems before they even knew they had them? Right. And so sometimes, when you say, what have you become an expert in and can do nearly effortlessly, I would challenge everybody listening to this to really give yourself some credit here. If you've been doing something for quite some time and you know the ins and outs of something, give yourself the value you deserve in that. Yeah. Because a lot of times we discount what we know. And then somebody who doesn't know anything about it comes in, makes a judgment, and all of a sudden we feel like we haven't, that what we do doesn't matter and we don't know what we're talking about. And instead, we're like, hey, that's just a person with their opinion. Come back to me after you've got 32 years of experience doing this. Right. And I'm not saying that we need to have an ego-driven, I'm better than you attitude. I'm saying that the way we create value in the market is to identify and be realistic about the value that we bring.
It reminds me of transferable skills, which we actually have somebody here, and that's what I pulled out. Gregory Byerline. I know Gregory used to race on a bike team with him, and he does what he said, what he's a master at: portraiture and podcast conversation. And somebody asked him, hey, tell me about your podcast. And he said, I do biographies of intriguing people I've met along the way. And they've been in the podcast that he has, is called Collected Clan Podcast. And he says they've been called, or his podcasts have been called audio portraits too, by people who know I'm a photographer. And his tagline. So if you can look Gregory Byerline, Byerline on Facebook. And his tagline for his photography is the bridal portrait specialist for the cosmopolitan, sophisticated, and decadent bride. That's called a USP right there, unique selling proposition. He just differentiated himself out. And there's going to be people who look at it and go, man, that's not me, man. I'm, country all the way, or I'm, whatever. I'm outdoors and whatever. That's not me. And he's saying, great, because the people who want that, they spot him a mile off. So he's done really well. But I like that he has taken what he does and is transferred that into podcasting. And now somebody said, yeah, it's like you're doing audio portraits now. That is a beautiful transferable skill. And I want people to hear that, what you just said about your client there, what I just read there. I'll never forget my friend Scott Stearman, who's a renowned sculptor, which you can find him at scottstearman.com. And he was tasked by a friend of ours. He said, Scott, if you did not have your hands, how would you do what you do? And he's trying to get him to the essence of what he really cares about. And I'll say that transferable skill. And Scott thought, and he goes, gosh, I used to do multimedia video stuff. And in that, I really did the same thing. I went after really impacting stories that we wanted to give exposure to last forever, to go beyond and reach more people. But it's the same thing. And interestingly, since that time, Scott has now written a book, one of the most amazing coffee table books on Jesus, on how does your how does the Jesus look like that you paint to everybody else? It's not the title of it. I can't remember at the moment, but interesting to look at transferable skills, which to me, Tom, that's also a call out just to the benefit of mastery. If you can't master one area without it having a transferable skill, even if it's just how it makes you feel. Sean Langwell is a guy, he posted on here. He says, making 3-point shots in basketball. Now he's not a professional basketball player, but it made me think about my mountain biking that I'm talking about. What does that serve? Am I going to try out for the Olympics? I think I'm past my prime there. That had its place a long time ago. Am I looking to compete? I do some, but that's not really the point. I really do it in all truth. It's fun. It's just fun and joyful. I appreciate the health, wellness, and strength that it gives me. But I think really, Tom, I think it just helps my self-confidence. I think I go out there and I do it because it just makes me feel competent. It's just an area that I'm competent in that I can then take and bring right here as I stand up in front of you or somebody else, or talk out loud or write the book that I can bring in. So, yeah, it wasn't a tangent I was looking for here, but transferable skills. What a gift of mastery, isn't it?
Mastery. And what's that psychological principle that if we have some sort of control of the environment, it sustains us. It gives us everything. The study that I refer to is that senior citizens in assisted living facilities, they noticed there was this group of people who were cantankerous, and no matter how they brought the food out, they would say it wasn't prepared right, too salty, not salty enough, too hot, too cold, overcooked, undercooked, and they would send it back. And the next time it came back, it's that idea of agency. Like I have control, and they live longer. And so even though they were expressing it kind of in a cantankerous, negative way, because they had control, they had more happiness, more satisfaction, belief that they could do something that would help themselves in the future, and they enjoyed life more. And when we have mastery in something, what are we really exhibiting? We're saying we've got some control over it, right? You can
That's
choose a
good.
line. You can choose a line on your bike that is going to get to the edge, but not quite over it, and it gives you a great sense of satisfaction. The most exhilarating rides that I had were the ones where I almost fell.
They're definitely memorable. Yeah. Well, I like that aspect of control and a feeling. Gosh, again, Tom, if we look at the pulse of the culture right now, I would say that with the increases in, well, they call them diseases of despair, depression and anxiety and these things, that we have a culture that feels more out of control. And yeah, again, looking at the younger generation, especially, there are so many new things. There's constantly new input, new opportunities, new ideas. It's nonstop. I have to do that some, Tom, is pull myself back. Right now, I'm at a place where I'm realizing, okay, I got to pull back. I think I'm reading 6 books right now. And I'm just interested. I'm at a point. I'm interested. I got some things that I'm interested in. I'm ordering books, and I literally have bookmarks. I bought a big thing. Hey, here's a cool random thing. So I like to underline things in books. It helps me just focus on them, and I can come back and look at it. But I'm a bad underliner, so I get frustrated with myself when I underline, and all of a sudden, my line's through the words, and now I can't read the dumb things. So I find myself getting straight edges. I bought on Amazon these really narrow or really thin wooden bookmarks. So I'm using those now so I can, stick it on the page and underline it without messing everything up. I think I bought 20 of them. They're about gone. I've got them everywhere, in too many. And I'm thinking, okay, I have too much good. So I need to chill out and let's have some focus.
I think you need to move to a highlighter because then it doesn't matter.
That's true. That's true. I could do that too. But there, I mean, that's some of the detriment, the downside to the culture that we're in, where there is so much new stuff to go after. I think it's keeping us from sticking with something and having mastery. Again, I hadn't thought about it till you said it, Tom, and having control. That's probably it too. I appreciate the mountain bike I can get on. I may not be able to I may feel out of control. I feel gosh, at some point in time, I feel out of control with everything in my life, Tom, as a parent, as a spouse, as a podcaster, as a provider, if I go down the roles, there's probably not a week that goes by that at some point I don't feel out of control in some area at some time. On the mountain bike, I can jump on there. I'm in control. I'm in control of my time. I'm in control of my speed. Nobody's going to slow me down. I go to remote areas. There's nobody there. I'm in control of my body. I'm in control. I feel more in control of my mind out there. I'd never thought about it that way. That's a great sell for mastery in and of itself.
I think this is the third show in a row where I've mentioned reading Jordan Peterson's book,
Mm-hmm.
12 Rules for Life. And he talks about the lobster in there and the dominance hierarchy. And basically, you got the big giant lobster. He's got it great. He's the king. He gets the best food, the best place to live. All the women lobsters want him, right? I mean, he's the king. And then it talks about when lobsters fight, and they don't like to fight because when they really get after it, both of them usually lose because they lose body parts. I mean, those claws are big and powerful. But what he said is that when a lobster loses a fight or it gets pushed off, it gets, I think, a decrease in serotonin. And what that means is the lobster's body posture kind of gets smaller. They kind of crouch over, their claws come in, and they send a signal out to everybody else that, hey, I'm a loser. I mean, it's just basically, which makes them more attracted to other lobsters who like to bully because they're looking for the lift. And so you get this cycle of beatdown. Well, look at athletes. What happens when a player fumbles, causes a turnover, makes a mistake, does something bad? Immediately their head drops down, their shoulders come forward, and they get a drop in the chemicals that make you feel good. Now, imagine riding your bike, having a fantastic ride. You push the limit, you see some things. What is your body posture like when you get off of that bike? I mean, are your shoulders a little bit broader?
Mm-hmm.
Is your spine a little bit straighter? Is your countenance a little bit more bring it on? Let's see what's going on. And I think that's another thing is when we have mastery over something, when you see someone who has mastery over something and they do it, whether they perform on stage or they're an artist and they create, they come off the potter's wheel or they finish if you talk to them right after that, you're going to see their shoulders wide open, their eyes looking straight at you. You're going to see a level of confidence that comes out of that. And so I think this right here is a lesson for us all. If we have mastered something in our life, even though it might now be a hobby, going and visiting that hobby is going to recreate that powerful emotional state of confidence that bleeds over into everything else. I mean, do you ride right before podcasts? Do you notice that the energy level on your podcast is a little bit better?
Yeah, which is probably 75% of the time or more, because I ride before lunch. I don't eat till I ride. So I ride, I eat, and then I do a podcast. Almost the majority of them. Yeah. And my energy is up. I don't like to do them in the morning because I'm more prone to be, I'm just not in, I don't have my mojo yet. Even after a good morning time of, my quiet time and devotions and whatever, I'm still not, I kind of ease into the day. I have my coffee and kind of get going. I like to get some of the minutia taken care of, the emails, the urgent stuff, whatever, do my ride. And then I come here and yeah, I'm present. I'd say that. You talking about failure, Tom, reminds me of, and I have not been able to find this. I was at a men's retreat a long time ago, and they showed a clip that I can't find anymore. And it was the Olympics, probably a decade ago or more. And it was an American gymnast who was trained by his stepfather, who was of a different nationality, I think, or, immigrated or something like that. And it showed them, and in the Olympics, this guy's doing the high bar and misses it. So he does the flip, comes down, misses it, bam, hits the mat. And just, of course, fairly devastated. Comes back. I think there were tears, and it showed the dad, the stepdad, coming over and trying to encourage him. But ultimately, what the dad said is, "Buddy, at this point, you got it," because he had a next event. I think it was the pommel horse. He said, "Go back. At this point, you just got to trust the training." That was the message at this men's group that makes me think about this now, that at some point, especially because you mentioned failure, Tom, when you have that failure, your best opportunity to get back in, we love the comeback, right? We love the undeterred athlete, especially like that at the comeback, is just to trust the training. He said, we can't change the devastation that the guy had moments ago on this failure. Now you got to go forward to the next event and just trust that you have done the training, that you know what you're doing. And the moral of the story there, the punchline is the guy got up and killed it on the pommel horse. I don't know if he got the gold medal. I can't remember. It's been too long ago. I wish I could find that again. But that's another aspect of this trust the training when things are going poorly, when things are hard. I mean, I can come in with a hard day, Tom, and with, something that's troubling me or whatever, and I can still stand up here and do a good show generally because I guess I can trust the training.
Yeah. The other thing, I teach a webinar every day or every Monday at 9. And because the content and what we discuss is in and of itself uplifting, I get jazzed from doing it. And I can be tired, or I could have had some situations that I didn't, that I wouldn't choose before it. But 10 minutes into it, I'm all in. And that's another thing that we can take from this. When we have something that we have mastered and done well, if we trust the training, if we get into it and do it, it just kind of takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Right? It just takes you where it needs to go because you've been down that path before. The talent code, and here's an interesting, this is the nerd in me. The talent code was written by Daniel Coyle. And in that book, he did this whole chapter on Brazilian soccer. And before the 50s, the Brazilian soccer wasn't any big deal. They were just an also ran. They never competed well in the World Cup. That nobody talked about them in an unusual way. And then in Brazil, they introduced this new game, and it was called, I think they call it futsal or foosball or anyway, it's indoor soccer. It's, I think, 5-on-5 players. It's very fast. The ball is about a third of the size and heavier than a soccer ball, and there's no space. And so what they did is in Brazil, the young players there, they wouldn't play outdoor soccer growing up. They would play this indoor game in very tight spaces. And he talked about how in Brazilian soccer at the highest level, Brazilian or football World Cup, they call it the beautiful. They play the beautiful game. So Europe and Germany and those countries, they play a very physical game of soccer. You know, it's their big bodies and their power. But Brazilian was called the beautiful sport. And so he started studying the brain science of it. And this is what happens when you exercise and compete in a very tight space, your brain gets conditioned to that. And so the myelin sheath, which is the nerves in the brain that connect, the tighter it gets wound, the faster that the impulses can actually go back and forth, like up to 100 times faster if you have lots of repetition, if you have lots of learning, if you've done it. Well, in um, outdoor soccer, you might only have the ball in your possession a few minutes total out of the whole game.
Yeah.
In this indoor variety, it's like it might be in your possession 5 times that. And so a player playing this indoor version in a very tight space under a lot of pressure is getting 5 times the experience than when they play outside in all that space. And so this is what happens. To the brain, everything slows down and they are able to see the space that's there. Whereas other players who've only played that way, they don't have the experience of the tight environment. And so that's why the great Brazilian players like Pele and some of the others that come out of that indoor to outdoor tradition, they have an advantage because they learned mastery under a whole different level of pressure.
Yeah.
And it's just how the brain is wired to work. And so the old Karate Kid, wax on, wax
Yeah.
off,
Yeah.
and doing all that stuff, there is actually a lot of scientific truth to that. And when people can play, you know, whatever you do, when you do it under pressure, when you do it over and over again, and you can make it into a game, that mastery that comes is incredible. That's why when you see, I don't know if you ever see golfers that juggle the ball on the club face.
Yeah.
You see a lot of kids at country clubs doing that, and they don't even realize it, but they're wiring their brain to understand what happens when how the ball lands on the club face and the spins and everything that happen, and then that actually translates into touch around the green and what you're doing. So it's a pretty incredible thing, and when you pull something off like that, it gives you that confidence. And so now when a competitor is competing against somebody who's got that level of mastery, and that point in the game comes where it could go either way,
Mm-hmm.
and then the superstar stands up tall, it's like everybody else goes, uh-oh, we know what's going to happen now.
Right? Well, there you go. There's our charge then, is to have that mastery, be that champion. It's just great. And folks, people posted so many different things. We didn't get through a whole lot of them, but I think we got the point across. God, Tom, I'm going to be ruminating now on your aspect of how it gives us control. We'll probably be talking about that at the dinner table tonight. So thank you for that, brother.
You got it.